Ibn Qayyim says, rahimahullah, he says that in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are more than 100 benefits. It pleases the all-merciful Lord. It repels the shaitan. It removes anxiety. It breeds happiness. It strengthens the heart and the body. It illuminates one's heart and one's face. It attracts sustenance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People of dhikr tend to find the attainment of sustenance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala easy. It acquires inside of a person awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as the sweetness of Iman. It gives a person and inspires inside of a person the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the soul, the very essence and soul of Islam. And it creates inside a person deep knowledge and gnosis of Allah. It turns a person towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it gains the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's gives life to the heart of a believer, and it also results in the servant of Allah being remembered by Allah. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ, as the Quran says, of course, in Surah Al-Baqarah, that remember me and I will remember you. So one of the results of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also remembers the dhakirin. He remembers the servants of Allah who remember him. And he goes on to say that it is the sustenance of the heart and the sustenance of the soul. The rust of the heart and the rust of the soul is buffed out, is cleaned out, wiped out. Sins are forgiven because of it and wiped away because of it. A person's ranks are raised in the akhirah and in the Jannah because of it. It breeds a familiarity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person, as opposed to an unfamiliarity, a kind of distance, an unfamiliarity with Allah. Rather, dhikr familiarizes a person, makes a person comfortable with the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that a person takes pleasure when they are aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's immanence and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence around them, when they reflect on things like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being closer to them than the jugular vein, for example. When they hear things like that, it does not give them discomfort, but it gives them comfort and it gives them peace, because they have this familiarity. The presence of Allah is a familiar thing for them. It removes loneliness. Dhikr takes away loneliness in a kind of contradictory way, whereas people who are in dhikr are often in isolation, yet dhikr removes the sense of loneliness that a person can feel, and therefore people who isolate and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually are not in any kind of discomfort at all. And this is how you can probably differentiate between people who are perhaps isolated but depressed from people who are isolated but in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are two very, very different states. Dhikr creates remembrance inside of a person, and it provides salvation from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It brings down tranquility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down tranquility, as the hadith says about people who are gathering, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tranquility descends upon them. The people who are in dhikr are covered in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, as the same hadith mentions, and angels surround them. So they're actually not alone, because they're in the company of Allah and they're in the company of the angels. Dhikr ultimately keeps a person preoccupied away from the kind of speech that is harmful. A person who is constantly thinking about remembering Allah and keeping their tongue moist with the remembrance of Allah generally tends to not have time for backbiting and gossip, and they don't usually engage in filthy talk and obscene talk with the same tongue. They tend to have this kind of consciousness about themselves. Dhikr makes the dhakir, makes the person of remembrance a happy person. It makes those around them happy. If the people around it, if a person is in dhikr, then the people around them feel a sense of happiness and satisfaction. Dhikr keeps a person safe from regret and despair on the Day of Judgment. And if a person, while remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also sheds tears, then this is one of the ways in which a person can attain shade under the shade of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. So as the hadith says, that 7 types of people are given shade under the shade of Allah. One of them is رَجُلٌ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَالِيًا فَفَاضَتْ عَيْنَاهُ, a person who in solitude, in isolation, in solitude, remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and through that remembrance they cry, right? They shed tears. And Allah, the gifts of Allah, the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in abundance and in various forms are acquired through the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhikr is also one of the most easiest of forms of worship, yet the most virtuous. The easiest to do, but the most virtuous in terms of reward and in terms of how it benefits a person. It is a form of cultivation. Dhikr is a form of cultivation and plantation or the planting, if you like, of trees and plants in Jannah. Because some hadith speak about how when a person makes tasbih or makes dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trees are planted for them in Jannah. So it's almost as if through a person's dhikr, their Jannah is cultivated, their Jannah is built for them. The garden is their garden is being cultivated in Jannah. It gives a person safety from forgetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the person who is engaged in dhikr, has the habit of dhikr, usually has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala foremost in their minds a lot more than a person who doesn't do dhikr. Because of the nature of dhikr, because of the flexible nature of dhikr, it can be done at any time and in all circumstances, and there's probably no other form of worship that is like it. Which is why the Prophet ﷺ, for example, is described as remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of his situations and in all of his conditions and in all of his states. It is a light for the slave of Allah in the dunya and in the grave and in the hashar on the Day of Judgment. And by it, through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person's actions come out and are elevated. Dhikr is the essence of the great quality, if you like, of wilaya, of Allah's friendship. So awliyaullah, people who are awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are marked out by dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is, if you like, the primary thing that stands out about them. And it is, of course, also the way of wilaya. The way to attain the friendship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through dhikr. Dhikr removes the need of the heart, the want of the heart, this sense of wanting and needing all the time, whether it's needing of others or wanting of others, or whether it's this feeling of want that I don't have enough, I don't have it, so I have to acquire more. This sense of insufficiency is removed through the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhikr disperses people's grief and anxiety, the kind of things that may cause depression. These things are dispersed by the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And dhikr keeps a person alert from heedlessness and from kind of being in a sleepful state. A person is spiritually wakeful or awakened if they are in dhikr. Dhikr results in, bears the fruits of deep insights, things that perhaps a person would otherwise not know, insights that a person might not acquire from books or might not acquire from talks or from classes and circles. They acquire these because they're in a more contemplative state, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them new insights, as well as states of mind, of consciousness, of mindfulness that they otherwise had never experienced. The person who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is close to the one whom they remember, meaning the dhakir is close to the madhkur. The madhkur is Allah. So The one who remembers Allah is close to Allah and is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is with the dhakir. Allah is with the people who remember Allah.